Breaking news. Ukraine has just destroyed Russian robotic convoys. We're looking at confirmed reports of a massive engagement in the Kharkiv region, and it is not what you think. It is Friday, February 6, 2026, and the footage we're analyzing today, well, it marks a definitive break from the warfare of the past. We aren't talking about tanks dueling in a field anymore, not at all. We are talking about a sophisticated, high-stakes hunt where Ukrainian interceptor drones have successfully, and I mean successfully, dismantled Russian ground-based robotic logistics chains. This is the moment science fiction becomes, well, it becomes military history.
It's a total watershed moment, really. We're witnessing the first true industrial-scale battles between autonomous systems. The human element, it's being pushed further and further back from that zero line.
Exactly. And the implications here are they're terrifyingly real. This is about the automation of attrition. So before we get into the tactical breakdown of how Ukraine pulled this off, and the technology involved is, frankly, mind-bending. I want to speak directly to everyone listening who understands the stakes here. If you support Ukraine, if you support the defense of freedom and justice in Europe, we need you on board. Subscribe to Defense Reports, your go-to source for timely, in-depth military and defense reports.
Staying informed is absolutely the first step in support. This landscape is changing, daily.
It truly is. So join me in the latest program by Defense Report for the latest in global defense news, military technology, and strategic developments. And today we're going to cover the rise of the kill zone and the robot wars. Because the headline isn't just robots fighting, it's about how the entire geometry of the battlefield has shifted, forcing armies to replace, blood and bone with silicon and steel.
And specifically, how Ukraine is managing to stay one, maybe two steps ahead in what has become an incredibly rapid technological arms race.
Okay, let's start with the immediate news. Late January, January 30th through the first few days of February. The Kharkiv region, specifically northern Slobozhanщina. We have these reports from the State Border Guard Service of Ukraine. They're detailing strikes by the Furia unit of the Heart Border Guard Brigade and the Aquila unit of the Steel Border Brigade. These aren't standard infantry fights, are they? What are we actually seeing?
We're seeing what you could call the interdiction of the interdictors. To really get this, you have to realize that Russia is desperate to supply their forward positions without getting their soldiers killed. So they've deployed these ground robotic complexes, or GRS, basically robotic mules carrying supplies.
And Ukraine is hunting the mules.
Ukraine is hunting the mules.
Yeah.
The Ukrainian response, led by these specialized units like Aquila, has been to hunt these robots with their own aerial drones. But the level of operator skill we're seeing now, it is light years ahead of where we were even 6 months ago.
There's one piece of footage, I think you know the one I'm talking about, that really just highlights this whole evolution. It's an Aquila unit drone operator. He spots a Russian vehicle hidden under an anti-drone net. Now, usually those nets are kind of the end of the line for a drone pilot, right? They're designed to tangle the rotors or just block the view.
Right. Standard doctrine would be to try and, blast through the net or maybe find a different angle. But this Ukrainian operator did something that requires, nerves of steel and just incredible dexterity. The footage shows the drone just hovering outside the net. But here's the critical context. This was an active area. There was a civilian car passing right through the zone.
Which is just a stark reminder that this war is happening in people's backyards, right next to daily life.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And this highlights a huge difference in the rules and engagement. The Ukrainian operator didn't just strike blindly. He held his position. He actually waited for that civilian vehicle to clear the kill zone entirely. Only once the civilian was safe did he initiate the attack. And he didn't crash into the net. He dove the drone under the net.
That is an unbelievably difficult maneuver. You're flying FTV, first-person view, you're barely feet off the ground, and you're navigating a confined space to hit a target you can hardly even see.
It's surgical. He navigated right through the physical defenses and destroyed that Russian robotic logistics vehicle hiding underneath. And the aftermath is just as telling. There were Russian infantry nearby, probably handlers or troops waiting for those supplies. The moment the robot was hit, they just scattered. They were intercepted shortly after, but the primary target, the important target, was the machine.
It really paints a perfect picture of this cat-and-mouse game you mentioned. Russia hides robots under nets, Ukraine sends drones under the nets. But let's zoom out a bit. You said Russia's using these robots because they have to. This brings us to this idea, this concept of the kill zone. What does that mean in 2026?
It means the whole front line has changed. If you look at maps from 2022 or 2023, you thought of the front line as a trench, maybe a few hundred meters of danger. Today, the kill zone extends about 15 kilometers back from the line of contact.
15 kilometers. That just completely invalidates traditional logistics. You can't run a truck convoy up to the front anymore.
It's a death sentence. The density of FPV drones is so high that any manned vehicle, a truck, a jeep, an APC entering within 10 kilometers of the zero line is considered a suicide mission. We are seeing near total saturation of the airspace. If it emits heat, if it has a radio signature, or if it moves faster than a walking pace, it gets hit. Simple as that.
So this is driving the Russian strategy of battlefield air interdiction, or a BAI, and they're trying to do the same thing to Ukraine, right? Cut off the main arteries.
Precisely. You just have to look at the Pokrovsk sector.
Mhm.
The Russians are focusing on highways TO-514 and TO-515, but they aren't trying to crater the road with artillery anymore. That's old thinking. It's inefficient. They are just patrolling the airspace above the road with drones. They're cutting what we call the ground lines of communication, the GLOCs. They don't need to destroy the asphalt. They just need to make sure that nothing biological can survive the trip on it.
Which forces the shift to robotics. I saw a statistic from, I think it was November 2025, that was absolutely staggering. It said that 90% of supplies to Ukrainian positions in that same sector were being delivered by unmanned ground vehicles, UGVs.
That is the reality of 2026. 90%. The last mile of logistics has been completely robotized. We're looking at machines like the Russian Courier, the Depesha, and the Scorpion. These aren't Terminators from the movies. They're low-profile, ruggedized platforms. Just think of a trapped box loaded with mortar shells, water, and ammunition.
So they're basically armored delivery mules.
Exactly. But they are expendable. If a courier robot gets hit by a Ukrainian drone, Russia loses some metal and some ammo. They don't lose a trained soldier. And because they are low to the ground and don't get tired, they can crawl through mud that would exhaust a human in minutes.
It changes the entire calculus of the fight. But there is a darker side to this robotic evolution. We aren't just talking about delivery boys on tracks anymore. We're talking about combat capability. There was a report. It involved the 3rd Separate Assault Brigade and a manufacturer called DevDroid that I think represents a massive psychological threshold we've just crossed.
Ah, yes. This is the story that I believe military ethicists and historians will be analyzing for decades. It happened late last year and into early 2026. Ukrainian forces successfully captured Russian troops, without a single Ukrainian soldier being physically present at the capture.
The idea of surrendering to a machine, I mean, that's something out of a dystopia, but it's happening right now. How did that play out tactically?
Well, the setup was pretty standard. Ukrainian FPV drones hammered the Russian bunkers, destroying their fortifications and, shocking the defenders. But instead of sending in an infantry squad to clear the trench, which is always the most dangerous part of an assault, they sent a robot. Specifically, a Droid TW 7.62.
Which, as the name implies, is mounted with a machine gun.
A 7.62 millimeter machine gun on a stabilized turret, yes. The robot just advanced on the Russian position. Now, you have to put yourself in the mindset of those Russian soldiers. You're concussed, your bunker is gone, and out of the smoke comes this machine. You can't negotiate with it. You can't suppress it effectively with small arms because it's armored, and it doesn't feel fear.
Right. The 3rd Army Corps has that saying about this: robots do not bleed.
And that is the psychological hammer blow. The Russian soldiers surrendered to the robot. They came out with their hands up.
Sure.
And the really surreal part is what happened next. There was no Ukrainian sergeant there to zip tie them. They were guided out of the combat zone by an aerial drone hovering overhead, buzzing directions at them, basically herding them like sheep back to Ukrainian lines.
That level of dehumanization of the battlefield is chilling, but from a Ukrainian perspective, it's a massive victory. That's a position taken without risking a single Ukrainian life.
And the endurance factor is just key. There was a documented case where a single Ukrainian UGV held a frontline firing position for 45 days.
45 days.
45 days. It held the line completely alone. It only needed to retreat for maintenance and reloading every 48 hours. A human soldier needs sleep, food, water, morale support. A robot just sits in the mud, sensors active, weapon hot, just waiting for movement. It fundamentally changes the tempo.
Okay, so this brings us to the technology that's enabling all of this. Usually when we talk about drones and robots, the counter move is electronic warfare, EW jamming. In 2024 and 2025, jamming was king. You blast radio static, the drones drop. But these new reports suggest jamming isn't working on these convoys. Why?
Because the signal isn't traveling through the air anymore. Both sides are doing this, but Ukraine has really pioneered it with units like Magyar's Birds, that's the 414th Regiment.
Hmm.
They've moved to fiber optic control.
So we're seeing a return to wire-guided tech, like old anti-tank missiles, but for drones. Explain how that works. How do you fly a drone with a wire attached?
It's incredible engineering. The drone carries a spool of hair-thin, specialized glass fiber. It doesn't drag the wire, it unspools it as it flies, so there's almost zero tension on the line. The data transmission is via laser pulses inside that glass core,
Which means it's invisible to radio frequency scanners.
completely invisible and unjammable. You simply cannot jam a photon inside a glass tube with a radio wave. It's physics. This gives the operator two huge advantages. First, immunity to EW. Second, the video quality. Radio signals degrade. Fiber optics provide crystal clear, uncompressed 4K video instantly.
That explains how they're hitting targets deep in industrial zones or inside hangars. The signal doesn't cut out when you fly behind a concrete wall.
Exactly. And the range is just shocking people. Magyar's unit recently set a record. They destroyed a Russian tank at a distance of 42 kilometers using a fiber optic drone.
42 kilometers, that's a
Yeah.
marathon. That puts rear area logistics hubs, which used to be considered safe, directly in the firing line.
It redefines the safe rear area. If you're a Russian tank commander sitting 40 kilometers back thinking you're out of FPV range, and suddenly a silent drone with a wire tail slams into your turret, there's no sanctuary anymore. The only real downside is the one-way ticket aspect. You can't reel the wire back in. Once you launch, that drone is expendable.
So, if the Russians can't jam these drones and they can't hide from them, they have to physically shoot them down. And this has triggered the rise of interceptor drones. We saw some of this tech at Russia's Archipelago 2025 Expo. What are they throwing up there to stop this?
We are seeing a return to aerial dogfighting, but it's localized and it's robotic. Russia realized EW was failing against fiber, so they introduced kinetic interceptors. The most notable is called the Yolka.
The ramming drone.
Yes,
Wait,
it's a pure kinetic interceptor, doesn't carry explosives, they're heavy, dangerous. It uses advanced AI computer vision to lock onto a Ukrainian drone and just physically ram it out of the sky.
that sounds simple, but the computing power required to hit a small, fast-moving target is significant.
It is. It needs that onboard AI because the latency of a human pilot is just too slow for that final impact. Then you have the Osod, which fires a net to entangle raiders, and the Kinzhal, not the missile, but a high-speed jet drone made to hunt slower quadcopters.
But the most disturbing development, I think, has to be the sleeper drones.
The Gibrinator modules, yes. This is asymmetric warfare at its peak. Russia is deploying drones that land on rooftops or hide in tree lines, deep in the Ukrainian rear. They power down completely, they hibernate, they emit no heat, no signal. They can sit there for weeks.
Like a landmine, but in the sky.
Exactly. And then, when their acoustic sensors pick up a specific target, like a Ukrainian supply truck or a medevac, they wake up, launch, and ambush from behind. It creates this constant state of paranoia for anyone in logistics.
But Ukraine isn't sitting still. They have their own interceptor program, and from what we hear, it's proving to be incredibly cost-effective.
Ukraine's whole innovation ecosystem is just faster and more adaptable. We're seeing things like the Sting by the Wild Hornets Group and the Titan. These are purpose-built drone hunters. They fly at over 300 kilometers per hour. Their mission is to hunt Russian reconnaissance assets like the Orlan or the Shahed.
And the economics here are crucial, aren't they? A Shahed is cheap, and Orlan is expensive. If you can kill it with a Sting interceptor.
You win the economic war of attrition. You don't want to fire a $1 million Patriot missile at a $20,000 drone. You want to fire a $1,000 Sting at it. That is how Ukraine sustains this fight.
So, pulling all these threads together, the 15-kilometer kill zone, the fiber optic immunity, the dogfighting robots, what is the scale of this as we move deeper into 2026? This isn't just a few isolated skirmishes.
No, the scale is industrial.
Yeah.
Ukraine has officially stated a production goal of 7 million drones for 2026.
7 million. That is a number that is just hard to even visualize.
It's a swarm. And Russia is trying to ramp up via their Rubicon Center for Advanced Unmanned Technologies, focusing on autonomous swarms that don't even need pilots. But Ukraine is countering that with the Atlas system.
That's the digital wall concept.
Yes. Think of it as a unified automated defense network that spans the entire 1,300-kilometer front. It connects sensors, microphones, jammers, everything into one brain. If a Russian drone tries to cross the line, Atlas detects it, triangulates it, and automatically assigns a jammer or an interceptor to kill it. It removes the human delay from the loop.
It seems like the whole mission of this deep dive was to understand the robot war, but what we've really uncovered is that the war has evolved from massed maneuvers to a digitized struggle for the tactical rear.
It's an industrial competition of who can produce the most efficient kill chain. That's what it comes down to. The side that masters the automation of attrition wins. And if Ukraine can keep destroying those robotic convoys in Kharkiv like they did this week, then Russian logistics will collapse. Those robots are the only thing keeping the Russian offensive alive.
Which brings us right back to that image of the human soldier surrendering to the tracked robot. We have crossed a threshold in warfare that we can never, ever go back from. It's not just about better weapons anymore. It's about the fundamental removal of humanity from the trigger loop.
And once you remove the human, the speed of war increases beyond what biological minds can even process. That's the danger. But it's also where Ukraine's innovation is saving lives. Every robot that fights is a Ukrainian soldier who gets to stay in the bunker, safe.
And judging by the news from Kharkiv this week, Ukraine is adapting faster and striking harder than anyone expected. They are proving that in this new war of algorithms, they are still holding the winning hand.
For now, yes. But the pace of innovation means they have to wake up and basically reinvent the wheel every single morning.
Well, on that sobering but fascinating note, we're going to wrap up this deep dive. You've been listening to Defense Report by Alex, where we analyze the latest in military strategy, global defense, and advanced weaponry.
It's been a pleasure to break all this down.
And remember, if you want to stay ahead of the curve on what is actually happening on the ground beyond the headlines, for Shep, subscribe to Defense Reports, your trusted source for timely, in-depth military and defense analysis. We'll see you next time. Keep supporting us so we can continue bringing you the latest developments from Ukraine and around the world. Stay safe out there.